Hello and good morning, friends. Today, I want to take you on an inspection with me from a house from 1952. We don't have any records on the septic system, so we don't really know what's going to happen. I want to walk you through exactly what I find, and let's see what we're working with. Alrighty, so we see here that we have our clean out in the front, which is going to be this little fella right here, our manhole riser, and we can see that if we follow along, we have a riser over the distribution box, a dry well here, and a dry well there. So generally, with a 1952 home, we would expect to see a single 1,000 gallon tank to a single pit. The other thing we would expect is not to see PVC and less likely to have a manhole riser. Now, the reason why. Generally, with these older homes, you would expect to see a cast iron cleanout on the front of the tank. The cast iron cleanout looks and functions the exact same way as the PVC one. It's just a different composition type because PVC didn't exist in 1952. So the purpose of that cleanout is so that we can pump the tank. But it's also auxiliary function is so that way if you flush something you're not supposed to flush, rather than having to open the sewer stack in the house or remove a toilet to dislodge that clog, you can run this auger or push whatever it is out of the front baffle and dislodge the clogs. That way water can return to its normal use. So we see that somebody's gone and put PVC on there. I mean, somebody's done something at some point in the past, which is fine. The riser is super important on all septic tanks, so you can make sure you can pump the tank efficiently and get all of the solids out. When we look inside the tank, we're actually able to see that it looks like, yeah, it's probably from 1952. The concrete's got some degradation to it, and it's definitely showing signs of age, but they've replaced the baffle, so that's a good thing. The next thing that we're gonna look at is the distribution box. All right, so this little fella is the distribution box. So we can see here that we have the lids kind of cockeyed a bit and the walls are actually falling apart. So with this box, basically how this works is you introduce water into the tank, which is over here. That water will then flow into the box, which is here. And in this particular circumstance, they have the drain or the dry well over here plugged, but the water would then disperse into both of the dry wells. So distribution boxes generally will last roughly about 20 or 30 years in our area. This is going to be because the sewer gases that are coming from the sewage that's in the tank and the system as a total is just going to chew up the concrete. Over time, that gas is just going to make it to where the concrete loses its strength and it just falls apart. All you got to do is touch it and it just crumbles. So this particular one has reached the end of its life. It's time to replace that box. But you want to do that before it collapses so you don't run into any issues. So if you don't have a riser or an access cap on your distribution box, it's a good idea to consider getting your box excavated and at least looked at. Maybe put an access cap like that on your system so you as a homeowner can keep an eye on what's going on. The reason this box is important is that's what distributes the water to both of your absorption systems. In this particular circumstance, it's dry wells, but sometimes you have drain fields. Sometimes you have more than two, sometimes you have less than two. It just depends on your setup. The box is very, very common in our area. From time to time, you will see people do what's called serial distribution, and that's essentially where they have one line out of the tank straight to the first pit, drain field, whatever, another solid line to the second one, where it just basically goes in series, one after the other. The problem with that style is if you have an issue with leg A, nothing can get to leg B or C. Whereas the distribution box, if you have an issue with leg A, you're still able to use B and C as long as the box itself is in good shape. So this one needs to be replaced. The next thing that we're going to look at is the dry wells. And the dry wells are what deal with the water that comes into the system. Basically what you're going to see is a pipe just like this. Now, this particular one's PVC. Somebody's done work on the past, right? We've already discussed that. With the distribution box that's over there, the shape and size of that box generally in our area was used in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's assumed that all of this work was done roughly in that same time period. The county doesn't have any paperwork on it, so more than likely it was done without a permit. Not the end of the world as long as it works. So the pits. Essentially what this is, just a big void in the ground where when water goes into the distribution box, that water will then transit over to here. And in this large pit is just an open chasm with dry stack cinder block around in a large circle. It basically is a big cylinder where as the water goes in, it'll seep through those dry stack cinder blocks into the surrounding stone and soil. They'll usually put number 2 limestone on the outside of the pit, and that allows the water room to work into the surrounding grass. Over the course of many years and decades, these will eventually fill up. When they fill up, that basically means that they've reached the end of their life. What causes them to fill up is by not taking care of the tank, namely pumping it out. A little bit of debris, biomass, going to work its way from the tank to the distribution box, from the distribution box to the pits. It's real sticky, and so what'll happen is it gets into the soil, it gets into the block, plugs it up, and the water's got nowhere really to go except for back and out. So what'll happen is over the course of 40 years, those pits will fill up, and then they'll work their way to the tank. In this particular circumstance, these pits actually look pretty good. Now, it's been one guy living here for the last 30 years. The home's been vacant for a year, so maybe we're seeing a better situation than what we would have seen if there was a family of 6 living here continuously, but they're still functional. So these pipes exist so that we, as a homeowner, are able to pop them open and see what's going on inside of there. Ideally, you don't see any water, but that's not how the world works. You're always going to see a little bit. But as long as the water's not touching the pipe, you're perfectly fine. Just let it keep doing its thing. With these systems, it's very important to make sure you pump them regularly, right? So leave a comment below. Tell me, how often do you pump your septic system? Do you pump it every year, 2 years, 3 years? How often do you do it? Leave a comment below. I'm curious to see how often people are doing this. So you want to pump the tank, right? As you pump the tank, that makes it to where you can keep the system working as long as you can. The goal is to not put anything that's not coming out of you, so human waste or toilet paper, down your sewer. The reason why is the tank is just a concrete box. There's nothing fancy about it at all. Well, if you put flushable wipes, tampons, condoms, stuff that floats into there, you run the risk of that stuff getting into the pipe, causing a clog or causing something to get bound up. Not a good time. It's really inconvenient, especially with the depth of this system, right? So the system we're looking at right now, it's deep. You know, the tank itself is 5 feet below the surface. So if you have an issue on a spot that you can't reach with those lids, it's going to cost you a lot more, because now you're going to pay somebody with an excavator to come and fish whatever it is out of the pipe or out of the tank. I hope that this was useful. I think it's really neat to see these old homes. 1952, we get to see exactly what they were doing back then. The history of this house, we see that somebody's updated stuff over the time. Don't really know exactly when specifically somebody did stuff, but we can kind of make an educated guess based off the type of equipment that we see here. I think it's fun. I think it's fascinating. Hopefully you enjoy this kind of content. If you do, hit that like button, hit subscribe. I have more videos posted every day on the world of well and septic. Until next time, guys.